All right, so we are going to finish out 18 with human reproduction, 18.3. So we are going to talk about anatomy parts. We're going to start with the males and then we'll go into females. So males are going to produce gametes. This is the sperm. That's the gamete for males. And that's going to start, I usually start off anatomy portions where the gametes are produced and then how they make their way out. So the gametes are going to be produced in the testes. So that's this guy right here. Kind of everything in white. And if you look, there's these little tiny green squiggly lines. The tiny green squiggly lines are called seminiferous tubules. This guy right here. The seminiferous tubules are just like they sound, little tubes. And inside the tubes, they are lined with stem cells. They're lined with little stem cells, spermatogonia cells, and those guys produce the sperm. And then the sperm are going to make their way out of the testes and into this area. And this is the epididymis. And it's kind of like the storage container of the sperm as they grow and mature. So they develop in the testes and they move out to the epididymis and they kind of hang out there and just mature for a little bit. And then when it's time to leave the body, the sperm are going to travel up a tube. So the tube is called the vas deferens in this image. It's also called ductus deferens. It depends on the textbook. It depends on your source. But we've got the vas deferens, aka ductus deferens, and it's going to bring the sperm up into the body. Note, sperm are healthiest when they are produced at slightly cooler temperatures than the overall body temp, the core temp. So that's why they're housed outside the body. So the testes are going to be housed in an area called the scrotum. And underneath the skin of the scrotum is going to be musculature, and that musculature is going to make it the best temperature for the sperm. So if the body is cold, it will bring the testes closer to the body. If the body is really hot, it will relax and let the testes be a little further away from the body. So that way we've got the optimum sperm development for that. So that's why they are housed. They should descend. That happens about 7 months in development. So at approximately 7 months gestation, the testes should descend. If the testes do not descend out of the abdominal cavity, it's called cryptorchidism. So it could be one that's retained in the abdomen, or it could be both retained in the abdomen. But if that happens, it's called cryptorchidism. So back to where we were going. The sperm were leaving the body. So started in the testes, went to the epididymis, then it went up to the ductus deferens, and the ductus deferens is going to bring that sperm all the way around. It's going to go over the bladder on the back side of the bladder. And there are three different glands that we need to know for male anatomy. There's three. So we've got the bulbourethral gland. That's this little guy in purple right here. That one kind of preps the way because the sperm is going to come out of the urethra, and the urethra is what also allows the urine out of the body. And urine could be different pHs, and we need the sperm to be in an alkaline solution. So the bulbourethral gland kind of just preps the way through the urethra. It is what its job is. And then we have two other guys. We have, move this out of the way. There we go. We have the seminal vesicles, and we got two of these. That's this guy right here. And then we have the prostate gland, and that's this guy right here. The seminal vesicle and the prostate gland are really cool, and that they are going to add to the sperm. So they're going to release a whole bunch of secretions into the ejaculate, and it's going to be sugars and things like nutritional value to keep the sperm up and ready to go. It's going to be alkaline solution. It's also going to have antimicrobial properties, which are really cool because that antimicrobial properties also helps males be less likely to suffer from UTIs than females are. So just some neat things going on. But we've got the seminal vesicles and we've got the prostate gland. And so that sperm went through, it met up with the seminal vesicles. It's going to go to the prostate gland and it travels through this duct. It's no longer called the vas deferens anymore. It's called the ejaculatory duct. And then this is where it's going to meet up with the urethra. So this area right here is the prostatic urethra. This section is the membranous urethra. And then this is the penile urethra, and the sperm will leave the body out the external urethral opening. All right, so anatomy parts on the penis itself. So we got the external urethra opening, that's where the urine and the sperm will leave. The head of the penis is called the glans penis, and the head of the penis should have foreskin on it. That foreskin would be present in uncircumcised. If a child was circumcised, really early on, if anybody is circumcised, the foreskin is removed. That's what's happening with that. Otherwise, we're going to have the head of the penis, which is super, super sensitive, lots of nerve endings there, and it is protected by that foreskin, that kind of hood of skin there. Coming down from that, we have two areas of spongy tissue. So a really cool thing about human anatomy, the male reproductive parts are very similar to the female reproductive parts in utero. In utero, remember I was telling y'all that default is female, default is X, default is female. And if the SRY gene is present, that we said should be on the Y chromosome, if that's present and expressing, then we won't have ovaries, we're going to have testes. We won't have a clitoris, we're going to have a penis develop instead. So we have some very analogous tissues, whether it's male or female. And so the corpus spongiosum and the corpus cavernosum are what we call spongy tissue or erectile tissue. And what that means is that they are going to have lots of blood flow going to those areas. So the spongiosum one is going to be around the urethra area, and the cavernosum one is going to be above. There's actually two cavernosums above that section. If you looked at it and not a sagittal view, but more like a transsectional view, that would you would see that there's two cavernosums and one spongiosum. But anyway, that's your spongy tissue. So that's the area that when you're thinking thoughts like that, blood flow is going to go into that area. That's your spongy tissue. So we have that for males. We also have that for females too, around the clitoris. Kind of same situation. So what am I missing? I think we covered all the parts. I think we covered them all. All right, so I'm going to keep on going. We have the female anatomy. So with the female anatomy, I want to start just like we talked about with the males and where the gametes are produced. So with females, the gametes are produced in the ovaries. There are two. So here's our little ovaries here. They are stuck in place with some ligaments. There are two on either side of each ovary and then like the broad ligament that goes over top of everything. So that's where the eggs are going to be made. I don't I don't have a really close-up view of the ovary in this PowerPoint. But that's where the eggs are going to be developing in the follicle. I've got some pictures of follicles, I think, later on. But that's where the eggs are coming from. So once you hit puberty, once a month you will undergo ovulation, and it could be one egg, but it could be more. If you are prone to twins in your family, you may be ovulating more than one egg every time you ovulate. But the egg will leave the ovary on day 14, and it will go into the fallopian tube. If you look, the fallopian tubes have these fimbriae, these finger-like extensions. I feel like it kind of looks like a baseball glove or a softball glove, and it kind of holds the ovary in place, but there is a little gap. There's a gap there. So occasionally the egg may slip through the gap and make its way someplace it doesn't belong. But hopefully the egg will come out from ovulation and go, be caught by the little fimbriae and go into the fallopian tube like it's supposed to. That's what it's supposed to do. So ovulation happens, egg is out here. And we said that egg only has 24 hours, so it needs to meet up with some sperm here for fertilization if that was your goal. If that's not your goal, that's okay too. And that egg is going to keep on traveling down the fallopian tube. We said it takes 2 or 3 days, at least 3 days, to get through this fallopian tube and then out into the uterus. The uterus is going to have a lining on it. It's the endometrium, and that's the stuff that comes off every month with menstruation. Then we have the myometrium. I can't. It's not going to let me do it. I can't write sideways. But this is the myometrium, and myo just means muscle. So this is all of the smooth muscle that is going to contract. It's going to contract every time menstruation happens and you get cramps. It contracts. It is also designed to push out baby with labor contractions. That's the muscle there. So we've got the lining of the uterus, endometrium, myometrium is the muscles. Um, if that egg ovulates, comes through, never got fertilized, it's just gonna keep on going. So now we're in the neck of the uterus. We're in the cervix. that is going to leave. It's going to come out the cervix and it's going to go into the vagina and it's just going to go on out the body. It's going to go on out the body. So we have this view of female anatomy. As far as the ovaries, you can't see them in this view here, but you can see the uterus. So you can see how big it is. You can see that the uterus literally sits on top of the bladder. So any time we have a pregnancy situation, baby is literally tap dancing on top of the bladder. Um, Here is the cervix, and then we're going to come down. The vagina is here. Then we've got the urethra for women is here. And then obviously the rectum is over here. External anatomy, we have two labia. We got the labia majora, that's the big one because it's called majora and it's on the outside. Then we got minora, and that's the smaller one. Remember I was telling y'all again about analogous parts, testes and ovaries, and the highly innervated glans penis, and it's surrounded by the foreskin. Same with the clitoris. We've got the clitoris, lots of nerves going on here. It has a little bit hood of skin. Um, so it's very, very similar. It's also got spongy tissue in there for blood flow. We don't have the Bartholin's gland mentioned in here, but it's similar to the bulbourethral gland in that it kind of preps the way before intercourse, but it's kind of it's around this area, but it's not showing up in the imagery. But that's another gland for women. Moving on. Mitosis, meiosis. Please, if you are not familiar with this, if you jumped into 10-12 without taking 10-10, I need you to refresh on what this is. I know probably all of us covered this in high school, but just in case you forgot, um, it's important for sperm development and egg development. So this is the coverage of mitosis. I've got a video here and a video on meiosis. I need you to know the difference between the two. Like, what are the stages? Is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase? Um, I need you to know at the end of mitosis, who starts it, what's at the end. One parent cell starts mitosis, and at the end you got two daughter cells, and those two daughter cells, are they identical or are they unique? At the end of mitosis, your two daughter cells are identical. They're identical. But at the end of meiosis, you're going to have unique stuff because at prophase one, you're going to have crossover, and that's what gives everybody different genes. At crossover, that's where your mom chromosome lined up next to your dad's chromosome, like we talked about, to make them homologous chromosomes, and you swap. You swap a little bit of genes along the chromosomes. That's called crossover, and that's happening at prophase one. And that's why every sperm and every egg is absolutely unique because they all went through prophase one. So please refresh if any of this is like stuff you haven't talked about in a while. Go back and just kind of briefly cover the basics of mitosis and meiosis. Because here's the picture of sperm. So sperm, remember I was telling you about the seminiferous tubules, and those little squiggly lines were in the testes. This is the spermatogonium, the stem cells that line the tubules in the testes. So these are all along the outsides of the tubules, and they are going to undergo mitosis. So we start with one parent cell, you end up with two daughters. Those two daughters are identical. We're going to keep one of the daughters, and that's going to be our primary spermatocyte. And then that one is going to undergo meiosis, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. At the end of telophase, right, we have cytokinesis, and we have two, and these are called the secondary spermatocytes. And then those two, I love spermatogenesis because it's exactly how it's supposed to be. In meiosis, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. So we're going to go through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. That is the worst PMAT ever. But that's what we're going through. Again, we got prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, two. Two. And at the end of these, now we have two from that guy, and we have two from this guy right here. So at the end, we start off with one cell, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then those two cells, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and we end up with four. There we go. We end up with four total cells at the end. And every single one of these sperm are unique. They are unique. And that's the benefit of sexual reproduction. That is the benefit because asexual reproduction, the budding, the fission, all of that stuff, super easy. It's super easy. And it's advisable in conditions where nothing ever changes. Where nothing ever changes. If everything is stable, asexual reproduction is way easier than trying to find a mate, reproduce with that mate, go through any sort of behavioral things you need to do. If you're a plant, you got to grow flower parts to reproduce. It's way easier to just grow yourself asexually than it is to undergo sexual reproduction. The caveat is everybody's going to have the same genes. And what if something comes along? What if your environment isn't stable? And if things are bad, you absolutely want sexual reproduction because you have genetic variation and you want genetic variation because the odds are if something bad happens in the environment, one of your offspring is going to have the genes that allow them to survive, and then you've passed on your genes and you've been successful. But if everybody's the exact same and something bad happens, everybody gets wiped out. So that's the benefit of sexual reproduction. All of these little guys, all of these are all different. They are all genetically different, which is super cool. And the whole benefit of sexual reproduction, biologically speaking. So, eggs. We said eggs were going to be made housed in the ovaries. They're actually created in the ovaries, but that happens in utero. Your eggs, my eggs in my body developed inside me as an embryo in my mother's body, which is wild. So yeah, it's crazy to even think about. So it's a similar start. It's a similar start. We got the oogonium, which is going to be the very first little stem cell. We're going to undergo mitosis. At the end of mitosis, you have two cells, and both of those are identical. And we're going to take one. We're going to take one of them. And that one is then going to undergo meiosis, the very beginnings of meiosis. And that most important stage of meiosis I was telling y'all about, prophase one. It's the most important because that's where crossover is happening and that's where you get your genetic variation. And then, bam, we're going to stop. We're going to stop. And that is where we stop. And then you're born and then you're out and you're in the world and you grow and you develop and you are not tolerant of high levels of sexual hormones because you're a child. But then puberty hits. And in puberty, your brain decides I can take way more levels of estrogen and progesterone, way higher, crank them up. And your brain be like, I can absolutely tolerate more testosterone. Bring it on. And those higher doses of those hormones are going to cause all the changes associated with puberty. They're going to cause all of those secondary sex characteristics for testosterone, the lower voice, the higher muscle mass, all of that. For estrogen and progesterone, it's going to be growth of breasts, hips spreading out. All of those secondary sex characteristics are because you're tolerating a higher dose of sexual hormones at puberty. So once we hit puberty and all of those hormones are going, we're going to continue meiosis. So we're going to continue on into past prophase one, metaphase one, anaphase one, telophase one. And then at telophase, you go from one cell to two. So we split. Here's our polar body. It's just going to go. We're just going to not worry about the polar body at all. And this is the egg cell that we're going to focus on. And this guy is then going to continue on and it's going to go prophase two, anaphase two, metaphase two, and it's going to stops in metaphase two. And that egg will stay in metaphase two and travel all through your body and just make its way out if it never meets up with sperm. The only way an egg finishes metaphase and goes into anaphase and then telophase, the only way it's going to finish up meiosis two is if fertilization happens. So in this case, we have sperm coming along and fertilization happens, and now we finish out. We go from metaphase two and then at fertilization, we're going to go into anaphase. Remember in anaphase, metaphase, everybody was lined up in the middle, in the middle. And in anaphase, we pull those chromosomes apart. We pull them apart. Remember what I was telling y'all about when we pull chromosomes apart, that sometimes the chromosomes don't split even Stevens, where we got one over here and one over here. Sometimes the chromosomes all go in one place. You get a trisomy or a monosomy. That could happen. That could happen. Um, so this little diagram over here is showing just the number of eggs available after puberty, and you can see how it declines with age. So the number of eggs declines with age, and eventually they are not going to be around, and you will go into menopause. Um, but this is at the end of fertilization, you're going to have your one egg and you're going to have two polar bodies that we're not even going to worry about. We're not going to worry about. So we've got our fertilized egg with the little teeny tiny nucleus right here from the sperm. It's going to go in and meet up with the nucleus of the egg. And now we are diploid. We are two in fertilized egg. Please note that we're stopping at prophase one at birth. And that makes everybody genetically unique. And then that egg stops at metaphase two, and it doesn't go past metaphase two unless fertilization happens. Unless fertilization happens. Okay. Remember we were talking about non-disjunction where you could have a trisomy or you could have a monosomy? Um, that can absolutely happen. Trisomy 21 is Down syndrome, and so there's a little animation that shows you again how non-disjunction could happen. And a few years back, the Gerber baby, they always have the Gerber baby contest, right? And it's like the cutest babies out there. And a few years back, I don't know, maybe 7 years or so, the Gerber baby was a Georgia baby. It was a Georgia baby. And not only was it a Georgia baby, but this Georgia baby has Down syndrome. So he is flippin' adorable. And I just had to show y'all his cutie patootie little picture. But remember, we were talking about how fertilization is going to move it from metaphase to anaphase. So the older, according to the data, the older mom's maternal age is, those eggs are, the higher the likelihood that non-disjunction could occur and that we could end up with a trisomy or a monosomy. And again, some non-disjunction things are compatible with life. Down syndrome is one of those that is absolutely compatible with life. And then others are not. Others are not. So sometimes those trisomies or monosomies could lead to miscarriages early on because the genetic material is not correct. All right, hormones. Hormones. I'm going to try not to get too into the weeds on the hormones, but it all starts up here. It all starts up here in the hypothalamus. And then the hypothalamus is going to talk to this little, it looks like a little jelly bean, honestly. It looks like a little jelly belly, and it's called your pituitary gland, and it's sitting like behind your eyes back there, where the nerves cross is pretty much really close to where the pituitary gland is, and that pituitary gland is going to release some hormones. The pituitary gland is going to release two hormones. Excuse me. It's going to release the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone. The follicle stimulating hormone is going to produce the gametes. The gametes. Follicle stimulating hormone is going to create spermatogenesis, increase, facilitate, make more sperm. So that's follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. The luteinizing hormone, LH, is going to talk to these cells. Okay, so I told you about the seminiferous tubules. They were these little squiggly lines of tubes, and they were housed inside the testes. There are cells in between the tubes. There's cells in between the tubes, and those cells are called Leydig cells. Leydig cells. The Leydig cells in between the seminiferous tubules, housed inside the testes. The Leydig cells are going to be responsible for testosterone. They're responsible for the sex hormone. So the testosterone is going to be produced based off the luteinizing hormone, how much luteinizing hormone. All of these hormones, just by the way, the hormones, when they get produced, they are going from the anterior pituitary out into the bloodstream. They're going all over the body, but unless you have protein receptors, it doesn't matter what hormones are flying past you unless you've got the lock to the key, and your gonads are going to be the places that have the receptors. So the testes have the receptors to pick up the follicle stimulating hormone, and it's going to tell itself to make more sperm. The testes are also going to pick up the luteinizing hormone, and the Leydig cells in between the tubules and the testes are going to start producing testosterone. And so we're going to keep producing testosterone until levels are too high. They're higher than we want them to be. And then we're going to shut it down and stop this reaction with something called inhibin. And inhibin inhibits the reaction. So that is the male hormone process. And the cool thing about males is this, it's always happening. It's really cool and simple and basic. Um, Testosterone levels pretty steady. It's pretty steady throughout the day. It doesn't fluctuate like we're going to get to with women. With women, it's this similar start. Hypothalamus up here, talking to the anterior pituitary. The hormone that it releases when it talks to it is called the gonadotropin releasing hormone. The GN is gonads releasing hormone, RH, GnRH. And it's the hypothalamus talking to the anterior pituitary, telling the anterior pituitary that you need to release the gonad hormones. The gonad hormones, again, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone is going to talk to the ovaries, and the ovaries are going to develop those follicles. The follicles are the bags around the egg. They're the bags around the egg. So they're going to start developing the eggs and the bags around the eggs to get them going. Remember we said that they stopped in prophase 1. You were born with all the eggs you're ever going to have, and they were all at prophase 1. Well, now we're at puberty, and all of that follicle stimulating hormone is now going to tell those eggs to develop. And now you're going to go to um, metaphase 1, anaphase, telophase, and we'll continue on. And we'll go prophase 2, metaphase 2, and we'll stop. So we are going to develop the eggs in the ovaries and the follicles. The luteinizing hormone is also going to help the ovaries produce estrogen, which is going to give us all of our secondary sex characteristics. On ovulation, ovulation is day 14. So with ovulation, you are going to ovulate that egg. It's going to rupture out of the follicle because I was telling y'all the follicle is like a bag around the egg, and it's going to like pop like a balloon. We have a video that demonstrates this later, and the egg is going to go out of the ovary and into, hopefully, into the fallopian tube and then make its way through. So when that happens, we've got estrogen has really spiked up to cause this to happen, and ovulation happens. And then after the egg's out there, potentially that egg potentially could be fertilized depending on what's going on. So if that egg is out there, your body's going to assume that potentially could be pregnant. So your pregnancy hormone is progesterone. Progesterone. And so at first your ovaries are going to support the pregnancy, and that follicle that I told you just ruptured and burst at ovulation, that follicle actually changes. It's going to change color. It's going to become yellow. It's called corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum is the one that's releasing the progesterone and supporting the pregnancy. And it's getting you through the couple days that this thing is traveling through the fallopian tube and down into the uterus and embedding into the uterus and then building its little placenta. And then it will start to take over its own um, hormones. But in the meantime, progesterone is your pregnancy hormone, and that's what's going to support the pregnancy and suppress anything else. It's going to suppress any future ovulation. So it's called the corpus luteum. That follicle is yellow, and this is called your luteal phase. And assuming that that egg came out at ovulation at day 14, assuming the egg came out at day 14 and no intercourse had occurred, so that egg is not going to get fertilized. It's just going to make its way through the fallopian tube, and it's going to make it into the uterus, out the vagina, go on its merry way. We'll go through the luteal phase, but assuming nothing happened, then we're going to start back over again with the follicular phase. So this is happening every 28 days, give or take, in the female body. So this is a picture of a very, 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 very full follicle, a Graafian follicle, the tertiary follicle, the highest level of the follicle can get before it ruptures and bursts in ovulation. And the other day I found this cool video that somebody has filmed it actually ovulating. So if you get a chance, please check it out. All you got to do is download the PowerPoint and then just hit play on the slide in the slideshow view, and you can watch these videos because it's really cool. It's cool to watch.
For the first time ever, we have
Let's see if
actual
we can get
footage of a follicle contracting, expanding, and releasing
it.
the egg.
It
This
goes.
is
There goes.
ovulation.
There goes. So I'm not going to make y'all watch a video of a video, but please check it out. It's cool. All right, so this slide is all of the hormones and cycles and everything all in one. And I love me a good visual. I love visuals. So I feel like this slide does a really good job of showing us the ovarian phases, the ovarian cycle phases, the follicular phases, the development of the follicle, which I told y'all was the bag around the egg. And so here's our, itty bitty little guy, and then it grows bigger, and then eventually it's going to grow so big that it is ready for day 14. And at day 14, ovulation happens. Follicle with the egg, and there's our little bitty egg, gets released. And if that egg is released, you could potentially be pregnant. So that follicle is now a yellow color, the corpus luteum right here, and that's going to release progesterone, assumes that you're pregnant. And if that doesn't happen, then the corpus luteum now becomes a little white color instead of yellow, and it shrinks down, and eventually we just reabsorb that stuff. But we start off with the corpus luteum, so this is the luteal phase, So those are the three cycles of the ovarian cycle. So know those: follicular phase, then ovulation, and then the luteal phase. Moving on to the uterus, what's happening in the uterus? Um, this is a better view of the eggs developing inside the follicle and what it looks like when it is absolutely ready to rupture for ovulation. Here's our uterine cycle phases. So in the beginning, we're going to start with a fresh slate. So we have the menstrual cycle. And with the menstrual cycle, if you look over here at this diagram, here's menstruation happening. We started off with the full layer, full lining of the uterus. But remember I was telling you about the uterus is called the endometrium? We slough off this outer, this top layer. This apical layer sloughs off with menstruation. So if you look at this diagram, these like kind of pigtaily looking capillary beds that go into this tissue. We close them off. We close off the blood flow on those capillary beds. That's going to kill the tissue at the end that's not getting any more blood flow, and that's what causes menstruation. So we're going to slough off this upper level of uterine lining, the endometrium up there, during menstruation. If anybody's ever heard of endometriosis, that's where you have the uh, inner uterine lining in places where it doesn't belong. So not only is it inside the uterus, but it's in places it doesn't belong, like attached to your intestines and stuff like that. And every month it is super duper painful. So the beginning of the uterine cycle is menstruation. We're going to do that, get that out of the way, remove the top layer, and then we got to build it back. So the proliferative phase is building it back. So see, we're going to build this stuff back. We're going to build it back, build it back, build it back until day 14. What was the important thing that happened at day 14? That was going to be ovulation, right? And ovulation, the egg is out there and could potentially be pregnant. We could potentially have a fertilized egg out there. We don't know. The body's just going to assume it is. And so this is called, for the uterus, the secretory phase. And what's happening in the secretory phase is that layer that we just put on, we are going to get it ready. So this embryo could implant. So it's going to have all sorts of secretions, some sugaries, some all sorts of stuff in there, prepping the uterus. It's going to get even thicker. It's going to swell. You're going to have the bloating that happens, water retention. It's going to this process in the secretory phase because it is gearing up for baby. And then when baby doesn't happen, we go right back to menstruation where we're going to cut off the capillary beds to that extra apical tissue, slough off the apical tissue, keep the basement membrane of the endometrium, and then rebuild it in proliferative phase again. So those are the 3 cycles of the uterine cycle. I like showing you the hormones as well because remember I was telling you about how cool guys are because testosterone is like 24/7. Spermatogenesis never ends. It just keeps happening. They just keep producing real sperm all the time. But that's not the case for women. So you can see through the 28-day cycle at menstruation, estrogens and progesterone's pretty low. Then as we get closer and closer and closer and closer to ovulation, you can see, look how much estrogen spikes. It's going to spike up there, and then we got ovulation, and then estrogen takes a nosedive. But after ovulation, we said the egg's out there. It could potentially be pregnant. It could potentially be fertilized. So this is where progesterone, our pregnancy hormone, is going to save the day and it's going to spike up. That's our pregnancy hormone. If pregnancy did not happen, if that embryo did not implant, everything goes back down and we start all over again. So hormones for females fluctuate all sorts of different ways depending on the cycle. So it could be ovulation, it could be near menstruation, it could be day 21 and body thinks it's pregnant, but hormones absolutely fluctuate for females. So that is why I found out that drug testing, like most of the drug testing, when you look at dosages, were primarily on men, that the FDA did not require female test subjects to participate in studies. So most of the dosages on the medicine that we have, like, like take two Tylenol, that's based on male physiology and not female physiology because the lab rats whose hormones are fluctuating all the time were too difficult to study. So male rats are easier, and that's why we get a lot of that stuff. But that has changed now. But up until I want to say the 90s, most of the work on this kind of stuff was only on males, just male test subjects. Um, right. So males are able to produce sperm all day, every day, throughout their lives. Women, though, remember how we were talking about eggs and how the eggs decline? We saw that chart of the decline in eggs until like the 40s-ish. When the egg decline happens and you don't have any more eggs and you have ceased menstruation, you have to cease menstruation for a full entire year. When that has happened, you are officially in menopause. But there is a solid up to 10 years before that that's considered perimenopause. And that's going to have all of the symptoms associated with menopause. They just creep up on you. So hot flashes, mood swings, hair loss, joint pain, all weight gain, all the things. Um, could be happening a solid 10 years before menopause even hits. So facts to know, good to know. And so treatment for menopause, some people will do hormone therapy. There are more recent studies that have disproven the studies from the 90s that said that hormone therapy is going to immediately cause breast cancer, which is not true. There's actually cases where it shows that hormone therapy lowers the all-cause mortality for women if they are receiving hormone therapy. So there's a lot of more current studies coming out discussing that as an option at menopause. Moving on, gestation. So we had that fertilized egg that we talked about, and we are going to carry that in mom's body, and that little bitty baby is going to go through some changes. So in the very first trimester, the first 12 weeks, um, it is going to go through some changes. So the pregnancy officially begins the day after your last menstrual period. When you have intercourse, hoping for this baby, and you have intercourse at fertilization, you're 2 weeks pregnant. At your missed period, you're 4 weeks pregnant. You're 4 weeks pregnant. So what baby actually looks like, this is our textbook picture. And you can see this cutie patootie little baby, a first trimester little baby, approximately 9 weeks there. That's under the microscope. That's what it looks like under a microscope. And so we can see our cutie patootie little arms and our little fingers. So you can see our arm buds. The legs aren't quite as distinguishable yet. You can see the little eyeballs. And the ears are way down low. They will come up higher, but there's our little ears. There's going to be a little heart that's hiding back there. We got the liver back here. And then all of these little repeating somites are vertebrates. We all have these repeating somites. All of us tetrapods really look similar, by the way, like us and the reptiles and the birds. And we all look really, really close together when we're in utero, like this. So much alike in the very first beginnings. All right, so after your missed period, you are 4 weeks pregnant. And that this is 5 weeks pregnant. This is 6 weeks pregnant. So this is what it looks like actually without the microscope. This is 6 weeks pregnant which is in the state of Georgia. That is where the law kicks in at 6 weeks pregnant. So that's a regular old petri dish. That they're about, yeah, they're about this big, regular old petri dishes. And so that's about the size of what it looks like at 6 weeks pregnant. And then you can see that baby and its surrounding tissue gets even bigger. And this is at 9 weeks, which is about this here with the microscope. With the microscope. And at the end of 12 weeks, you have made it through your first trimester. This is where it's one of the most critical periods. Remember, I was telling you about the genetics and monosomy and trisomy, or maybe somebody has some sort of genetic error, something going on in there. This is when usually we find out about tragic things in the first trimester. If things are not compatible with life, usually happens in the first trimester. Usually, but there are absolute cases that may get past this and we don't know until the second trimester. But in general, first trimester, because in the first trimester we are getting our all of our major organ systems. So our nervous system is trucking along, our muscles are starting to form, the bones are starting to form. The notochord that we used for structure in utero is going to be bumped up right against our vertebrae here. That little guy is starting to degenerate and it's going to turn into our intervertebral discs, the little cushions between your vertebrae. That's what the notochord turns into. But all of our organ systems are forming. They are forming. So if something goes wrong with your cardiac, with your circulatory system, with your nervous system, with the GI tract, whatever it is, if those systems aren't operating like they should be, usually this is when it kicks in, and you might have a miscarriage, but it could be later. It could be in the second trimester too. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. I'm hoping everybody has healthy pregnancies, but things happen. Um, Second trimester, you are going to be in the fourth month and fifth month. Um, and in this case, we are going to, remember I was telling you the bones are starting to form in the first trimester. So the bones of your face, you're going to have your frontal bone and you've got your maxillaries right here. And these guys, your maxillary bones are going to go in and they are going to be your hard palate that your teeth come out of. The roof of your mouth is your hard palate. That is starting to form. So if anybody's ever seen images of a cleft palate, that's where these two bones here don't fuse properly right here, and you don't get the proper fusion of the palate. But that's happening in second trimester. Your neural tube that happened really early, like really early, um, like maybe before you even knew you were pregnant, the nervous system has formed. The neural tube has formed. At the end of that tube, you're going to have this kind of swelling that's going to turn into the brain. It's going to be the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. And then those guys are going to split into the two halves, your hemispheres, and you'll have a right side hemisphere and a left side hemisphere. That is starting, the hemispheres are starting to enlarge in the second trimester. You're starting to get hair on the little bitty baby. They're starting to get peripheral nerves. So before we started off with just the one cord I was telling you about, and at the end of the cord is going to be the brain. That's your central nervous system. Central nervous system is going to be your brain and your spinal cord. All of that is central nervous system. And then anything coming off, all of the nerves coming off of that is called peripheral nervous system. That is kicking in now in the second trimester. There is an insane amount of growth happening in the first trimester because you're literally going from one cell into millions of cells in the first trimester. So it's wild, crazy growth in the first trimester. Um, the weight is going to go up from first to second trimester about 25 times. And at the end of the second trimester, baby is approximately a pound and a half, about a pound and a half. And if you look, baby looks more like baby. And remember, I was telling you how the ears were going to come up and they were going to get closer to where they were supposed to be. Now they are. Now they are. So they started off kind of down here and then they move up here. And you can see we've got little fingers. You can make out the cute little fingers. And the legs are definitely more developed here. And you can see his cute little toes. So we're looking more baby-like at the end of the second trimester. And then third trimester, we've got this, 4D, three-dimensional in real time, adorable. image. So we got our 7 month ultrasound going on. At the end of third trimester, things that are going on in the third trimester, we are going to be, if anybody's ever looked at a full-term baby, 40 weeks, 41 weeks. My oldest was 41 weeks. He was 8 days late. The last trimester is when babies are putting on weight. They are packing on the pounds, and that's where, if you've ever seen a premature baby, the premature babies are slim and full-term babies are they're chunksters. They got the rolls, they got the little squishies. They're putting on the weight in the last trimester. Um, the organ systems, they started at the first trimester, right? And we were talking about we're trying to get them all online in the first trimester. And now we're starting to make sure that everything works, that everything works. So at the end of the third trimester, everything should be working. But if baby is premature, we might need to do a little help there because sometimes if baby's premature, they have a hard time breathing. So the alveolar sacs that we exchange gases across, those little guys, sometimes they don't have enough surfactants in there to stay open and make sure that they don't collapse on babies. So if we know that mom is going into preterm labor, we might give mom some extra help to try and give baby some extra help to grow and mature those beforehand. But if baby comes early, we also have the option of CPAPs to give pressurized air into baby so baby's lungs will have a better chance for them. So we are getting all the organ systems tweaked, perfected, and eyes are open. You are seeing all the things in the last trimester. The nervous system, remember I was talking about brain and spinal cord and peripheral nervous system, everything coming off on the individual neurons in the nervous system. We're going to cover those guys with myelin, which is like the insulation. So like the rubbery stuff on your charger cords and your computer cords, that's what myelin operates as. It's a type of protein that goes around a neuron and it sends signals better when it gets myelinated. If you're curious, I've got animation on the stages of development, the womb to birth in 4 minutes. I've also got an image here of what mom is going through. So in the first trimester, the uterus doesn't move too much. It's about the size of your fist, is your uterus. And then you can see second trimester, and then by third trimester, that baby is wedged up in that diaphragm, like right under the ribs. The baby is big, and it's ready to go by the third trimester. So now we are ready for stages of labor. And there are 3 stages of labor that you need to know. We're going to start off with dilation. So most of us know this just from watching TV, but you've got to dilate the cervix. And we were talking about the cervix is the neck of the uterus. So that guy is right here, and it needs to go from, 1 to 10. It needs to go to 1 to 10 centimeters, and that will be fully dilated over here. So that's our first stitch. That is dilation is the first stage. Then the next stage is going to be actually pushing baby out. It's labor delivery of the baby. So hopefully baby is head down. That's where we want baby. We want baby to be head down. We don't want baby feet first. That would be considered breech. We want baby head down. And so here in this image, we've got baby being delivered, and that is stage 2. But we cannot forget about stage 3, and that's where we got to get rid of the placenta. So the placenta was helping baby all this time. The placenta was exchanging gases with mom. It was getting nutrients from mom. And so this has to come out. And this image doesn't really do it justice because this thing is the size of a dinner plate. It is big and it is a lot of tissue and it needs to come out. We can't leave anything behind because if you leave something behind, it could be a source for infection for mom, and we don't want that. So we need to make sure that we get all of that out of there. And that's the third stage of labor and delivery. We've got to make sure that we get the placenta, all the afterbirth out of mom. And we also need to make sure that once that placenta comes out, that I told y'all is the size of a dinner plate, we need to make sure that the uterus contracts because all that blood flow was going to that massive placenta. And we need all of those arterioles, we need all that blood flow to stop going there so mom will stop bleeding. We need that to happen. So oftentimes after baby has been delivered and we've got the placenta out, then if it's a vaginal delivery, I have 3 kids, and all of mine were late. All of them were late, and 2 of the 3 were vaginal deliveries. So that those nurses were on it, just massaging the uterus and trying to get it to shrink up to make sure that those blood vessels close down. We need that to happen. So these are our three stages. We got dilation, the birth, actual birth of baby, and then making sure we get the afterbirth of the placenta out. This is a really cool video that kind of explains the chimera that is mother that we just have kind of discussed and learned about in the last couple years. But we have learned that baby cells are legitimately coming out and mixing with mom sometime and forming a fetal chimera. So I have had three children, three pregnancies, and I have cells from all three of my kids that I'm carrying with me. So if you're curious, this video is really cool. I'm not going to make y'all watch the whole thing, but I suggest that you do because I think it's a really great, great video.
Basically low jacked into your mom.
So it's a really good video. I really do encourage you to watch it. These are the hormones that initiate labor. It's going to be the estrogen and progesterone I was just telling y'all about. Remember, they're going to spike up there when you are getting ready for labor. And so your body is stretched out, that uterus is stretched out, the muscle of the uterus is stretched out. That's telling your body it's time to go. The estrogen and progesterone are spiked up. It's telling your body it's time to go. So you're going to have Braxton Hicks, the warm-up contractions. And then once labor actually starts, it is a positive feedback. You are going to keep going until you deliver baby. So those estrogen and progesterone are spiking up there. There's another hormone that I don't want to forget about. It's HCG. HCG is the hormone, is your pregnancy hormone. So if you're trying to test to make sure that you're pregnant, if you are hoping for a pregnancy, or maybe you're not hoping for a pregnancy, but this is the test on a pregnancy test. This is the hormone that's trying to pick up. So you can see that once that baby has implanted in the uterus and it's starting to kick off and produce HCG, then you should be able to pick that up. You should be able to pick that up on a pregnancy test, and you can see it spikes really, really high there in the first trimester. So those are the hormones for pregnancy. Here's another image of the dilation. So some nurses here decided to carve out pumpkins in the different stages of dilation of the cervix. And so just a little picture for you. Maternal mortality. I was telling y'all things happen. And sometimes it does not end well for mother. These things are tracked by the CDC. The CDC keeps track of all sorts of really vital, important data for us in America. The CDC is where it's at. So we're lucky that we have the CDC not far away in the city of Atlanta. But this is the website. It still has the data there. I just checked it last week for the maternal mortality rates. And so we've got this chart. You can see it spikes. September 2021 is the worst in most recent years for maternal mortality rates, and then it has broken down into different ethnicities. And so we can see the highest, the worst up here is Native Americans. They have the highest rate of maternal mortality. And then you can see the purple line are going to be African Americans, and then you can see the other lines below are kind of pretty close to each other for Hispanic, Asian, and white American, are all in pretty close proximity. So I wanted to just show y'all like the data, show you the graph that um different races are different in the maternal mortality rates. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, systemic reasons for that. Lots of different reasons that I won't get into, but there are lots of different contributing factors to this data. But when you see these numbers, it's hard to put it into scale. So this guy, Nick Powers, he does a lot with data. And so he took this mortality rate data and crunched it and tried to compare it as far as the level of danger to other professions. So it's a really good video to give you some reference on when we say that maternal mortality for Black women is 69.9 from 2021. What does that mean? And how can we put that in a frame of reference? This video shows that for us. So I've included it in here just to give you some scale for those rates. All right, so we have talked about pregnancy and the stages of labor and all of that, but maybe pregnancy is not what you want. And so the textbook does not cover contraceptives at all. I don't know why. I feel like everyone should have a basic knowledge of these things. So I've got in here the different types of contraceptives. We have the different barriers. We've got condoms up here. We've got a diaphragm up here, and these guys are just like they sound. They're barriers to block the sperm from reaching the egg. And then we've got natural family planning, which is educational. If you look down here, I've got failure rates. So you can see failure rates for barriers and their failure rates. You can see natural family planning and its failure rates. And then moving on from them, we have oral contraceptives. So with the oral contraceptives, it's going to be, remember we talked about there are two female hormones. We got estrogen, we got progesterone. Progesterone is your pregnancy hormone. That's what's in these oral contraceptives. So with the pills, ideally you take them at the same time every day. You take the pill, the progesterone levels spike in your body, and then it goes out. And then the next day, take the pill, progesterone spikes and it goes out. So these are the oral contraceptive pills. Then there is the depot shot. The depot shot should last about 3 months, and is another easier method. Um, but do know that if you are taking birth control pills, sometimes different things can interact with your birth control pills. So if you are on an oral contraceptive and you went to the doctor because you were sick and you got some medicine, be aware that sometimes that medicine can counteract your oral birth control, and then you would want barriers or something else as a backup, as a backup. But we've got our oral contraceptives for progesterone. We have our shot of progesterone of depot shot that lasts about 3 months. Then we have Jadel. This is instead of our oral contraceptives that we talk, we take the progesterone pill, it spikes up in your blood, and then by the next day, it's come back down again. Jadel is an implant. Um, it used to be called Norplant, and then it was called Jadel, and I don't know what it is currently present day because it keeps going on and off the market, and that's because some people do really well with 24/7 progesterone and other people don't. Everybody's different. Everybody handles these hormones differently. So some people can't even take oral contraceptives. Some people just don't do well on oral contraceptives. Some people can take an implant and they're totally fine, and other people cannot tolerate an implant. But that's what Jadel is, and it will last years. It lasts years compared to the depot shot that's just months, and your pill that's, just that, just those not as long. Um, then we also have a another one that lasts years is the IUD. It lasts even longer because I want to say Norplant was like 5 years, and I think the IUD is up to 10 years. Um, and so that is permanently placed. That is permanently placed. So the IUD will be placed just last year, 2024. They finally suggested that pain relief should be part of the procedure for IUD implantation. And I 100% agree. I 100% agree because this is the cervix. And somebody a long, long time ago said that the cervix doesn't have any nerves, which is a complete and bogus lie. So we have the IUD that comes in here, and then it has those little T things to keep it in place. That's where that goes. And so they will put that in there as part of that procedure, and now they include pain management for that, which is wonderful. This is also 24/7. This is 24/7, and not everybody can tolerate 24/7. So the IUD is great for some people, but not everybody can tolerate an IUD. Then we got the NuvaRing. It's going to sit right below the cervix. It's going to sit right there. So the NuvaRing sits right here. And that's something that is 24/7 progesterone, but you can take it out. You can take it out. It's not permanently embedded in there. Then we have the very last method, which is sterilization. And sterilization is just like it sounds. It has a less than 1% failure rate. And so there are two different methods. You could have a tubal ligation, and that's where they are going to cut the fallopian tube, and then put clips on the end so it doesn't meet up. It is a more invasive procedure than the vasectomy, where we are cutting the ductus deferens. So that is more of a quick and easy procedure to slice the scrotum, pull out the vas deferens, cut it, clip it, put it back in, and you are out the door versus the tubal ligation, which is further down, more invasive. Both procedures, though, should result in sterilization. For the vasectomy, they have a method to test, so they'll have you come back in after 6 weeks and test the sperm count and make sure that it is dropped, and that's how you can test and make sure that that is working. For both of these situations, tubal ligations and vasectomies, both are still producing hormones. Both people are still producing hormones. They are both producing gametes. The only thing is the gametes can't meet up. The eggs can't meet with sperm. The sperm can't leave and go outside of the body. So the body is just going to reabsorb those guys, but hormones are still being produced. These are both also reversible. They are reversible. There could be a side effect though that scar tissue could form on either of these tubes, either the fallopian tube or the vas deferens has the potential to form scar tissue. And then even if they connected them together, it may have a hard time the sperm getting through the tubes. So it's more of something that you feel that you definitely do not want to have children anymore, and then you would go towards this method. As far as STIs, STDs. This is also from the CDC, and you could see these are older data from 2016. But out of the 50 states, Georgia was number 3 in gonorrhea. And we don't want to be that. We were number 5 in chlamydia. Both of these are treatable, by the way. Both of them are treatable. Um, and then syphilis. And if you look, there are two syphilis up here. There's secondary and there's congenital. And when I tell y'all that these are treatable, this is very much linked to care. Can you get to a gynecologist and receive care? Can you get to, if you are a pregnant mother, congenital syphilis is a mother that has syphilis and she passes it to her baby when she gives birth. All of these things are treatable. They're all treatable. All of these guys are 100% treatable, but you got to get to the doctor. In some situations, it's hard for mom to get to a doctor. Like the state of Georgia, right where we are, half the counties don't have an OB. They don't have an OB. So where are you going to get your maternal care? So just a little education out there that we can treat every single one of these listed in this chart here. Other things we can work to suppress, like HPV, we can try and suppress these guys. And then we will use methods to protect ourselves that we mentioned previously. As far as reproductive disorders, we have testicular cancer is number one, and it will be found in the younger male population, about college age, is when you should probably start doing your self checks. Please do, because I lost my brother-in-law to testicular cancer. So please check. Prostate cancer would be in the older male population, older than myself. That would be the age range to check for prostate cancer. We talked about cryptorchidism, and that's where the testes don't fully descend out of the abdominal cavity. It could be one, it could be both. We talked about spongy tissue in the reproductive area, right? If the spongy tissue in the penile area isn't getting proper blood flow to lead to erection, that's called impotence. Pelvic inflammatory disease could be caused by one of the STDs that we just talked about in the previous slide. Treatable. Ovarian cancer. Please be getting our checks. The pap smear, you used to have to go in for a pap smear every year, and now they bumped it out to, I think it's every 5 years, which is great. And that's when they're testing for cervical cancer. So they're going to swipe some of those cervical cells for the pap smear and check and see. So please do go and get your checks. And then breast cancer as well. I want to say mammograms kick in at age 40. But please be doing your self checks before that. Do your self checks for your breast self checks, do your testicular self checks. Please. Then we talked about the STIs, and the ones that are absolutely treatable and the ones that we can try and suppress. The last words up here, amenorrhea and dysmenorrhea. A before a word means without, so you don't have your menstruation, you stopped having a period. I know some people that have been very super athletic, and they've worked out so hard that they have stopped menstruating, so they be amenorrhea. We talked about endometriosis and how painful it can be. Dysmenorrhea, painful menstruation. All right, so that is it. I told y'all that second video is going to be so much more. I could talk about this for so long. I think reproduction is fascinating. So if you have questions, it's a lot of content in the chapter for reproduction and development. So please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.